Hello and welcome to Wrap Up Highlights. My name is Kyle and welcome back to my channel. And tonight we'll be discussing the top 5 MLB teams of the week once again. Now, if you missed my inaugural episode, I will remind you of our ranking system once again here. So it's based on your record through the week, based on the strength of schedule you played for that week, the raw runs you scored that week, and the runs you allowed, and calculating that into the runs you scored and runs allowed per week. And this raw data will be calculated into a score out of 100. And so we're going to get right into it with team number 5 of the week. That would be the New York Mets. They went 4-2 this week against the strength of schedule above 500 at 543. They did lose their first 2 games of the week against the Braves while winning 2 of 3 against the Nationals in the same time frame. And I saw that they also swept them tonight. They had a run differential of plus 10, which would be a final weekly score of 31-21, meaning they scored 5.17 runs per game and allowed only 3.5, which correlated to a score of 65.2 out of 100. Coming in at number 4 this week, we have the St. Louis Cardinals, also at 4-2. Their strength of schedule wins against was slightly lower at 520, and they won their final game of the series against the Rockies. They won 2 of 3 against the Phillies, and they split the first 2 games of their series against the Cubs, winning their final game tonight also, and that will be taken into account for next week's top 5 rankings. They had a run differential of plus 11 for the week, scoring 29 runs and allowing 18, which gives them a 4.83 runs scored per game average and allowing only 3 runs. This led to a score of 65.3 out of 100, barely beating the Mets by 1/10 of a point this week. Coming in at number 3 was the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Yes, they are the Devil Rays. They had a record of 4-2 against the weakest strength of schedule this week for the top 5 at 435. They won their last game of the series against the Mariners. They swept the Athletics and lost the first 2 games of their Orioles series and getting swept tonight, which will be taken into effect once again next week's rankings. They did have a large run differential of 17, scoring 42 and allowing 25, meaning they scored 7 per game and allowed 4.17 this week. Their score was 67 out of 100. Coming in at number 2 were the Diamondbacks. They also finished this week 4-2. They had a slightly stronger strength of schedule this week of 496, which is also still below 500. However, they won their final game of the series with the Dodgers this week before losing 2 of 3 against the Rockies and then taking the first 2 games of their series against the Braves. They also had a run differential of plus 17, scoring 31 and allowing 14. This gave them a 5.17 run per game and 2.33 runs allowed per game this week, giving them a raw score of 69.3. And your number 1 team this week is also from the NL West. That would be the San Diego Padres. They finished this week 5-1 against a ridiculous 561 strength of schedule. They had a plus 13 run differential, scoring 33 and allowing 20 this week. They won the final game of their Astros series. They swept the Brewers of all teams, and they split the first 2 games against the Guardians. They allowed 5.5 runs. They scored 5.5 runs this week and allowed only 3 1/3. Their final weekly score was 74.8. And this week I've included the remaining rankings, 6 through 30. You can take a look here, and as you see, there's nothing too significant that I see, at least this week. Most of the other good teams ended up ranking fairly high as well. Most of the other mediocre teams finished in the mediocre categories, and then more likely than not, most of the bad teams finished with bad rankings and bad scores, further proving that they once again all belong in the tiers that they are currently in. And with that, thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe if you like what you saw and heard today. Have a great night, and God bless.